All right, who's hungry in Detroit? Let's talk food security, food insecurity with Gerry Brisson, who is the president and CEO of the Gleaners Community Food Bank. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and of course, this is the eve of Martin Luther King Jr. holiday as well. An issue that Dr. King has been concerned about has been poverty, inequality, food insecurity, hunger, and you name it. And you are in the business of ensuring food security, if I can put it that way.
You can. In fact, you could say I and about 600 partners are
Right.
in the business of trying to make sure that people have the food they need when they need it.
Right.
And so it's a pretty heavy lift. There's about 800,000 people in the 5 counties that Gleaners serves that are food insecure.
Yeah.
Now, that fluctuates with the economy and other
Yeah.
things. Surprisingly, you've got pretty low unemployment and still that many food insecure people.
Right. So let's talk about that imbalance, the low unemployment and the high demand for food. I've been in many places where Gleaners Food Bank comes up as some sort of as the last resort, if you will, for a lot of people because they're being attended to by you guys.
Yeah, so it's hard to explain all of the dynamics that create food insecurity for people, right?
Right.
Employment, just the issue of employment is one we could take this entire 15 minutes and
Yeah.
another 15 hours
Yeah.
to talk about
Yeah.
how that works for people and when in their life is unemployment or underemployment an issue.
Right.
But we do know when we first started, I've been doing this for 35 years. 35 years ago, the only thing we looked at to decide what the need in the community was employment. Now that's all we knew to look at,
Yeah, yeah.
but nonetheless now we look at a lot more things as we try to decide what are people going through and what can they expect and how much help are they going to get and then how much help are they going to need. It's always a moving target, but this imbalance is one of the things I wanted to talk about with you today because one of the biggest issues we face in trying to solve this problem is that the need in the community is not connected to the resources to meet that need. So if you think about the 2 biggest fluctuations in need that we've had in the last 15 years, it'd be the Great Recession and it would be the pandemic,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In the heart of the worst times, the resources were at their highest. It's when it makes the most sense. But in both cases, at the end of the public crisis, if you will, when things
Right.
start to recover, the amount of resources that people have for help when they haven't fixed all the pieces of their life yet go down faster than their ability to catch up to it. And so we see these huge peaks in demand right after a crisis. Now, this has happened in every crisis. This
Yeah,
isn't new.
yeah,
The fact that it happens in every crisis, you'd think we would know better by now.
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So why don't we? Right? That's the real question we got to ask ourselves. Why don't we know better? We know that people who are low income take longer to recover from a crisis because they just don't have as much to fall back on. They still have family. In fact, we know the first place people go for help is family and friends. We know that's true. Today, it's always been true. But still, when you're low income, a lot of your friends and family are also low income. And so you recover together, but not as quickly as people that have more resources. So you have this long tail that happens at the end of a crisis that leaves a lot of people behind. And that's really where we are today. We are seeing numbers going up every month, more people coming to the places where you don't need an appointment. Those are predominantly mobile pantries. They're coming because they've spent everything. Inflation.
So we are in a state of emergency.
I feel that way, right?
Yeah.
So how does that emergency bubble up, right? Where do you see it? Well, every time you see a story about kids struggling in school, you should be thinking about food insecurity. Because it's twice as hard for a kid to learn if they're not well fed, right?
Yeah.
Every time you see a story about a conflict that seems like it's out of whack to what it should be, you should ask yourself the question, how much is food security contributing to that issue? Because it's harder for people to work, to be reasonable, to think about anything else if they're not sure where their next meal is going to come from.
So how is Gleaners dealing with this? You lay out this grim situation for us, the carry-on impact from the pandemic and the decline in resource, the demand going up higher for food and so forth. How is Gleaners how are you dealing with this internally?
So the first thing is we're not going to deal with it alone. right?
All right,
We're going to
right.
work with the Food Bank Council of Michigan. We're going to work with Feeding America. Feeding America is kind of the national organization.
Yeah.
Food Bank Council of Michigan is the statewide organization.
Mm-hmm.
We work with other food banks. We work with all of our growers and food producers and the people we get food from. I mean, believe me, we try to take the economy out of everything we do, right? Free.
Mm-hmm.
We started free.
Right.
But at the end of the day, besides just doing what we do, we tell people what's going on. We take opportunities like this to talk about it, and we say, if you want to make a difference, here's a way that you can make a difference. So we do more fundraising and we buy more food. Right now, we're buying half of all the food we distribute. We're buying, right? It's not getting donated. Now we're still getting a lot of donated food, over 2 million pounds of donated food a month, but we're distributing 4.2. So we're buying a lot of food. That food is great food. People appreciate it. It's milk, it's eggs, it's produce, it's healthy, nutritious food that people need. But nonetheless, we cope with it by bringing everyone together, figuring out how much we can get and what we can do. Everybody chips in and we meet as much of the need as we can. Now, I'm not aware today that people are leaving a distribution not getting any food. I'm not aware that we have that happening, but we're concerned about it. The amount of food we got from the USDA, that's the United States Department of Agriculture, and they have a program called the Emergency Food Assistance Program. It's connected to poverty. So typically, that program provides for impoverished communities somewhere between 10 and 15% of what food banks distribute.
Yeah.
Right now, it's less than 5%. Why? Well, because the way that system is set up is geared on helping farmers when the market's not working for farmers, right?
Yeah.
So if the farmers have a market for their product, there's no food in the pipeline.
So are you at a point where you can run out of, are you at a point where you could run out of supplies, or is that something that is out of the question? Either way, Gleaners is going to be good.
We won't run out of supplies, but what you'll see is people either getting less food or possibly...
Or having their food rationed?
I mean, possibly. That's exactly right. Right? So...
That's not a pretty picture.
You don't like it, right? It's not the way you want things to be designed. Now, the
Right.
truth is we have enough distribution.
We don't talk about food ration in a nation that is as wealthy as ours.
And we shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the fact of the matter is we can provide 3 meals for $1. It's not an expensive proposition, right? But, and we have the infrastructure. I want to say that too. With the 600 partners that we have and the 60 mobile pantries we run every month, there's a way to get food to people. If anywhere in the 5 counties we serve within 2 miles of your house, somebody is giving food away to people that need it, right? So the infrastructure is there. The capacity to distribute the food is there. When we talk about having more people coming for help than the food supply, what you end up doing is looking at that whole picture, and maybe instead of giving out 30 pounds of food or 40 pounds of food per household, you're going to give out 35 or 30 or 25, right? Now, people might have to come back. So if they came once a month before and they didn't get as much as they're used to, they'll come back. So one of the ways that the system kind of regulates itself is you can come back again and get food again if you're still in need of help.
Okay.
At the same time, it's inconvenient.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, right? And if the numbers keep going up, eventually you really do have a crisis where you can't give out enough at a distribution to really satisfy people.
Right.
And then you have to rally the whole community around that issue. We're not there today.
Okay.
But we're concerned about it. We're concerned that the food supply chain is fractured enough.
So I want to talk about that food supply chain industry for a bit here, because I mean the entire operation, or the entire work that you do, there's a moral essence at the core, because you're addressing a need here. Is there that realization among in the food industry and among your allies of the moral essence of what you're doing, and that this is a necessity, it is needed, it's a moral imperative, even as the demand goes high here, to be able to ensure that in fact that you don't come to a point where you feel like you're pressing the right button, saying basically we may be running out of something here.
Yeah, so complicated question, really. When you
Yeah.
think about all the people involved in the food supply chain, it's a lot of people with a lot of different responsibilities,
Yes.
right? You have grocery, which is a very different kind of business than
Yeah.
the growers themselves.
Yep.
And then you've got all the wholesale and producing and everything that happens in between, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a pretty, just that piece.
Right.
But then you have, well, who else supports it? I mean, tax dollars support this. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
always fighting for those, right?
Right, right.
Fighting to make your case that this is important work and that people benefit, not just the people getting the help, but the whole community benefits when these problems are solved. So
Right, right.
nobody wants to say, I want children to struggle in school.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to say that. Well, how do you pay for it, right? That really becomes the essence. And
Yeah, that's where the rubber meets the road.
that's exactly right. So when you look at the food supply chain, my experience in many years of doing this is the people in the food supply chain understand this is important work and it's got to be supported. And when times are tough, they do more.
Right,
Just
right.
across the board, that's
Right.
generally true.
Right.
Now, they're still running businesses.
Right.
Those businesses have to make a profit. They
Right.
have to pay labor. They
Right.
have to do the other things they have to do to be successful, right? So none of the people in the supply chain have all of the resources necessary to supply everyone who needs food with all the food they need. So what else do we have? We've got, SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program,
yeah.
food stamps. That's huge. In 2021, that was $105 billion. In that same year, food banks nationwide did $6.6 billion worth of aid. So when you start to look at what levers we have to pull when people are really in need, you've got to be looking at what is the federal government doing? What are they talking about? Are they aware of what's happening in the community? And some of the work that we do is communicating with our legislators and with other people who have influence in those places to say, hey, this is what's happening on the ground. So we got to think about, is the best way to serve the community through increases in programs like that? Is it through increased food? Is it through better thinking about our food and schools programs and how
Yeah.
they can serve better? You got to look at the whole picture. Now, the truth is, even then, post a crisis, we see this bubble that we're not dealing as well with as we should. And for me,
What role do you see the legislature here in Lansing playing? Because, I mean, obviously there has to be a legislative responsibility. Public policy comes here, tax dollars involved, more support, more embrace of the work that food banks are doing.
yeah, so I think the first role is the legislature needs to be in touch with their constituents. They really need to know who they are. They need to know their life. They need to be able to tell their stories.
Who's going hungry?
So that's exactly right. And what is going on in the community that's creating this dynamic, right? A legislator's going to see, I mean, so many hundred issues come before them. It becomes difficult to prioritize. Is employment more important?
What would you like to see? You're the CEO of a food bank
Yeah.
organization in Michigan. What would you like to see?
First of all, I think better coordination is the first thing I'd like to see. I
Okay.
think we could reach kids and families better than we do today. I
Okay.
think there's improvements that could be made in existing programs that would make things both more and better. So we did a grocery distribution program during the pandemic that was paid for out of the same dollars that pay for after-school meals. We did that program for half the cost, and we did twice as many kids and families.
Okay.
That kind of learning you don't want to lose. You don't want to just slide backwards into what you've always done. And I think right now, as a state, we have to really look at how can we make the best use of the resources we have. That makes everybody feel better. I think that should be a priority. I think secondly is we can't sweep the issues of the income community that is under the table.
Okay.
We've got to know who the people are who are needing help, and we've got to really
The faces
listen.
of hunger.
That's exactly right. So there's so many single moms, right? And you want them to be successful. You want to put the things in place that they need so that they can make sure their families succeed.
Yeah.
But that's just one group. There's seniors who inflation really affects particularly because many of them are on a fixed income. You look at the number of people on Medicaid in the 5 counties we serve, it's almost the same number as food insecure people. Why is that? Well, because they are the same people, right?
Yeah. So it correlates. It's not an accident.
And you have to coordinate your conversations. You have to
Yeah.
work together. Nobody can do this alone.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This is a really important time, and I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you so much. We'll be right back with more on Sunday Nation.